The chief mammies, Bairns, Hussies are coming to Scotland soon. So let's see what the SNP's up to now. Now, before I look at the Bairns Hussies in particular, let's just have a little reminder of some of the background on this issue. Remember the named person scheme? What was the problem with that? It lowered the threshold for state interference in family life. Instead of that threshold being abuse and neglect, it became well-being. No one was quite sure what that meant. It seemed to mean just happiness. And there was information sharing going on between social work, medical profession, police, schools, football clubs, without proper justification. The Supreme Court of the UK struck it down, but the principle underneath it was that the state's job is to supervise parents and to be ready to jump in as soon as the parents weren't quite doing things properly. They weren't quite adhering to the SNP's idea of how to bring up children. And children are so fragile that if the parenting's not quite exactly SNP style, that the state needs to step in to protect the children. Anyway, as a legal entity that was struck down in 2017, it's continued informally in a lot of parts of Scotland, which is a serious concern. Anyway, what did the SNP go on to next? 2018, they brought forward a paper proposing a redefinition of child abuse. That was previously defined as cruelty and neglect, and quite reasonable to me, but they wanted to change it to include things like ridiculing a child, making a child feel that they are useless, to make a child feel that their opinions, views or feelings are worthless, to expose a child to anger. Now you can see again, pushing in the same old SNP direction, justifying more and more interference in family life and undermining parents. Now, when that proposal was made, I savaged it in a video. It was watched by quite a few thousand people. There was a bit of commentary about it in the media following on from my video. Some other organisations responded to the consultation as well. And that just seems to have all gone quiet. There's been no attempts to take that further. Now, it may be that because of the fuss we kicked up, the SNPs thought this is a bit too hot to handle at the moment, let's just put it on the back burner. But in any case, it seems to have been dropped for the time being. Who knows when it might rear its ugly head again. Of course, we can remember the smacking ban. Smacking children, that was a normal part of parenting, overnight became a form of child abuse. So expanding the definition of child abuse again. So what would have been ordinary parenting, or maybe to you and I, you might think of as ordinary parenting or ordinary interaction with kids, the SNP would regard it as a form of child abuse. Recently, we've had the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child enacted into Scots law. I know there's been some legal wrangling over that. What does that do? It empowers professionals, it disempowers parents. Children are encouraged to see parents as service providers, and if they're not happy with the service that's been provided by their parents, in other words, if their rights are not being upheld, they can report problems to their parents' supervisors, to the next level up the chain, which of course is the government. So parents better get the message. They better do things right, the way the children want, the way the government wants, otherwise they're in trouble. And also we've seen more recently as well, this has happened before as well over the last few years, the SNP's produced questionnaires for school children that pry into home life. They're inviting children to report and complain about their parents, often on the basis of the SNP standard of the way children are supposed to be brought up. So I've got every reason to be wary about anything the SNP proposes in the area of children-family interactions in this sort of way. So, in the light of that background, let's have a look at the new kid on the block here, and that is the Barnahus. Now, this is an idea that was launched in Iceland in 1998 called the Barnahus, which just means children's house. It's quite a straightforward idea. The idea is that you have a house, quite literally, not something that looks like a government building, something that looks like a house in a row of houses. And it's a place where a child who's been the victim of a crime, or has been abused, or has witnessed a serious crime, a violent crime, for example, can be taken to. And they're taken there in order to go through the processes that they need to go to. In other words, they need to be interviewed, they need to give their evidence, recount their version of the events. And within this Barnahus would be representatives from the police, there would be child protection agencies represented. There would be medical staff as necessary, and there'd also be therapeutic support staff, counsellors or whatever. So the idea is to put all of these specialisms under one roof, so that the child who's been through this experience doesn't need to keep having to retell their story again and again in different scary looking government buildings or hospitals or police stations or whatever. And if the interview is being conducted by, say, one expert in the interview or in the interrogation process, if you like, the rest of the people from the other agencies can be watching on like a video link or watching from a nearby room, in any case within the house. So in terms of data sharing, you can see this is a bit like the SNP's dream. I mean, there's no need to share the data because all the agencies are there all together in one go, listening at the same time. Then the evidence that's recorded can be then used in court. There's obviously the issue, lawyers, there's a legal need for the children to be cross-examined in some sense, or to some degree as well, so there has to be provision made for that. But you get the basic idea. That's the idea of the Barnahus, the child's house. And it's been rolled out in quite a few European countries, having started originally in Iceland. Right, what do you think about that idea? Sounds pretty good to me. Sounds very sensible. So for children who've been abused or have witnessed some sort of serious crime, I can see that that could be a very helpful way forward with them. To be honest, is it going to make a huge difference to the damage done to these children? Probably not, but anything that's going to help or reduce the sort of ongoing trauma or stress resulting from these bad experiences, then that's surely a good thing. Now, of course, in the Scottish Family Party, when it comes to children being abused or witnessing violence in the home, for example, we want to deal with the cause. We want to reduce the incidence through enhancing stable family life, but the SNP is not really interested in that. But as far as this scheme goes, it seems sensible. But I've got two fears for it in Scotland. The first one's a relatively minor concern. I would fear it would become over-sentimentalised. There was a scheme that was very popular in the Scottish Parliament just a few years ago, where people knitted teddies to give to children who'd been abused. Now, is that a nice thing to do? You could say that is a nice thing to do. It's not going to do any harm. But as the government, as MSPs, is that really how you're going to get to grips with the issue? I felt it reflected a sort of sentimental, the way we wish the world was. We wish that when people have experienced something, children had experienced something really bad, if we do something nice for them, like give them a teddy, that will make up for it. But obviously, things don't really work like that in the real world. So my slight concern, this will be very sentimentalised. There'll be people who'll they'll be very proud of the kiddies' paintings on the wall, as though these are really going to make much difference. But that's a minor fear. This is my main concern. My main concern is that in Scotland, this system will be extended and extended. Already there's the proposal, these are going to be introduced in different parts of Scotland and basically rolled out until there are sufficient for children to access them from anywhere within Scotland. Now, as I said, the information sharing bit, the bit that was really controversial in the named person scheme, this is just built into it. All the agencies are there in one place, listening at the same time. So that's already done. Now it says this is for victims of abuse. Now, of course, we've got to bear in mind that what the SNP wants to do, it wants to broaden and broaden the definition of abuse. It's already clear that they basically think that shouting at children is a form of abuse. And, smacking obviously already is. And so it's easy to imagine that it could be, kid says at school, dad shouted at him. So before you know it, kid finds himself whisked off to the Bairns and is given an account of the situation to all the different agencies there together. So I think that's a genuine concern. Looking at the direction the SNP's already pushed, that's how things will develop with the Bairns. The range of children brought into it will expand and expand. Now, that's not just a fear, that's not just a suspicion, it's already happened. Before the first Bairns has even opened in Scotland, the SNP Green government have already said that they're going to broaden the criteria compared to the original idea as introduced in Iceland. This is from the government's document on this. All children in Scotland who've been victims or witnesses to abuse or violence, okay, fine, that's what the original thing was about, But as well as children under the age of criminal responsibility whose behaviour has caused significant harm or abuse will have access to trauma-informed recovery, support and justice. So they've added a category. So it's not just children who've been victims or witnesses of abuse, but also basically children who themselves have been abusers. So if you've got a child, for example, a boy who, say, attacked another child, injured another child or their parent, then they will be taken there to receive support and to help them to recover. Now, I don't know about you, but something's not quite adding up about that to me. But it reminded me of a conversation I had not too long ago with someone who works in a special school in Scotland. And in the special school, they've got some of the most challenging behaviour. Challenging means appalling in educational speak, by the way, if you're not familiar with the jargon. So it's quite routine, for example, for a pupil to say to a member of staff, F off you, and just come out with the most appalling personal abuse you could possibly imagine, and to actually physically attack staff. I mean, this is quite normal. And the strategy, the response within the school is always that you go to the child who's just done that and you say to them, how can we better support you? What can we do to help you? Okay. No criticism of them. You don't tell them that that's something you just can't do. You don't say that's wrong. You say, how can we better support you? Now, the Barnahus, that just seems set up to roll out exactly that same approach more widely. In other words, if someone behaves badly enough in a school, if they attack the teacher aggressively enough, they'll find themselves in the Barnahus, where really, to some extent, the red carpet is laid out and they're treated, really given the benefit of the doubt, and they're invited to find excuses and blame other people, basically. Because it's explicitly saying they're going to treat perpetrators and victims the same. And you can well imagine that some boy assaults someone at school very, very seriously. Then they get to the Barnahus, the social worker, the investigator. So why did you do this? Was there something on your mind? How are things at home? In other words, can you think of someone else to blame for your behaviour? And you can see, I think children can be quite smart. They'll pick up on that and think, oh yeah, actually, yeah. I think I can think of someone else to blame. Let me think. How about what Mum did last week? I'll try that and see if that gets me off the hook. So the Barnahus project, we need to keep a close eye on it. We need to do it because no one's going to do it within the Scottish Parliament. The named person scheme, it was so blatantly state overreach into family life. The Conservatives opposed it. In fact, all the parties apart from the SNP opposed it in some way or other. But the Conservatives opposed it. But they didn't realise initially that there was any problem with it. It wasn't the Conservatives who looked at the documentation and thought, whoa, what's going on here? This is wrong. We need to get and oppose this. It was people outside the Parliament. I think it was mainly Christian campaigners, actually. It was people outside the Parliament who noticed the problem. And then the MSPs, the opposition MSPs, jumped on the bandwagon. So we need to keep a close eye on the Barnahus project just to see how it develops. So as I say, the Barnahus idea is a good idea in itself. But on the other hand, schools are a good idea as well. But look what the SNP's turned those into. Okay, well, thanks for watching. Hope you found that interesting. Do give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed. As the Scottish Family Party, the council elections this year are a big project for us. If you're interested in getting involved in those, maybe in being a candidate, even, we're starting our online training on Friday this week. If you're interested in that, drop an email to Michael Willis, our chairman, and he will send you the Zoom link. But if you want to get in touch with Michael, his email address is below, chairman@scottishfamily.org. Okay, thanks for watching, and see you again soon.